Hello, I'm Lee Harris, and you probably know me as an energy intuitive, a channeler, an energy teacher, and a producer of many online courses. But you may also know me for my music, my art, and I have been a lifelong creative. So for me, creativity is just the best thing in life. And I also have come to recognize that anybody who's on a self growth path, anybody who identifies as sensitive or empathic, or anybody who identifies as a light worker, creativity is going to be a key component for you in your life, in your well being, and for many of us in the work that we do in the world. So I am thrilled to be teaming up with my brother from another mother, Scott Stabile, who is an amazing writer, creator. He's created movies and he has taught creativity workshops all over the world. And we're coming together to do something very special that we've never done before. It's called Creative Empowerment. We are going to the gorgeous Asilomar Retreat Center, which is in Monterey. And we're going to be there in February. So stay tuned to learn more about this very special event. And I hope you will consider coming and joining us. So, Scott, shall we start by talking about why are we doing a retreat called Creative Empowerment and why are we doing it together? And then hopefully we'll get some questions. So if anybody has any questions that you want to ask us about the retreat or about anything creative or living a creative life, then we'll have a conversation.
That sounds great. Well, I'm doing the retreat because I love you and I'm dying to do an event with you. So that's one main reason for me is I know that the two of us will come together and create something really magical because I love our energy when we talk about stuff and imagine things, and we're both creative humans and we both understand the just kind of the inherent nature of creativity and how important it is to manifesting a fulfilling life. Like it's at our core to be creative. All of us, everyone.
Yeah, and same. When we met, we immediately felt this kinship, and we got connected because somebody told me that you had a book coming out called Big Love, and they said, "Isn't that funny? You always sign off your newsletters Big Love." So I thought you should see this guy, and then I saw your Facebook posts and fell in love with them, and then we met. And I don't know about you, I feel incredibly lucky to be working creatively, creating things, to have created a framework and a company, and to be able to have done that. But for me, it all started in my bedroom as a kid, creating things as a way of expressing myself, balancing myself, feeling good. It was very therapeutic. So yeah, really holding space for people who want to either develop their own creativity, or also I'm going to lead some sessions on how do we put our creativity out into the world if you feel compelled to share it with people, because that's its own spiritual and personal journey, and can be tough and joyous all at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know, I suspect you would say the same. And people who come to my workshops, a lot of them are creatives, and one of the consistent struggles I see in people is not necessarily that they're okay being creatives and they're okay doing their own thing in their own space, but the idea of sharing their creative work, even though they want to and are longing to, is terrifying.
Yeah.
And for some people is really paralyzing. And I know that that's going to be part of the energy and the work that we're doing in this workshop as well, is getting not only not only centering people in their creativity in a way that feels authentic to who they are, but also creating a space that fosters the courage within each of us to go to the next step of sharing, if we feel called to sharing whatever it is that we're putting our creative energy into.
Yeah, that's so well put. I have a request. Are you able to come forward a little bit, just because you're smaller in the frame? So it'd be
Yeah.
lovely to get a bigger
Okay.
piece of your beautiful face. Thank you. Um, Yeah, it's so funny. I'm creating this podcast at the moment, which you have been a guest on. It won't come out until January. We'll start the episodes. But I had this great guest the other day called Paul Samuel Dolman, and he has a wonderful podcast. We've both been on it. It's called What Matters Most. And
Yeah.
he said something that was like a complete eureka moment for me. Because a couple of weeks ago, I was like going around the house and kept saying to Stephen, God, I'm so happy just at home, living very quietly. We've been traveling a lot, and then we just had this quiet period. And I just went super introvert and just kind of did my work, but was very happy in the house with the cats, just keeping everything simple, like rearranging a room. And I was questioning that. And I was, because I always think about extrovert, introvert. And he was sat in the podcast interview and he said, well, I'm an extrovert recluse. And I was like, oh my God, that was the language I was searching for. And I think that there's
Yeah.
an interesting thing about being a creative. It is a very reclusive, introverted thing. So I think sometimes the act of putting it out into the world is a weird thing for you to get your head around, or to try and navigate the fears, the doubts, the self-judgments, and to recognize that that's a kind of it's a process all unto itself. But there are ways to identify that process, come to figure out who you are and when you're going to need to support yourself because part of you is going to be freaking out, and you start to recognize those patterns. But the reason to put your stuff out, I maintain, is connection. It's not about being incredibly proud about something you did, because sometimes you will be, sometimes you won't be. But it's about putting something out that connects you with the rest of the world. So, for example, I would never have met you if you hadn't put your book Big Love out or been putting your social media posts out. And some of my closest friends I've either met because they're, doing things publicly in the world like you or I are, or because a friend of mine said, oh, my friend Sheila does this great thing at the community center. I think so often what we create in the world leads to connection, and it leads to connection with other people and other experiences. And that's kind of been a light bulb moment for me in the last few years, that's what it's really all about.
You know what's cool? May I say something that's cool about this experience is that I'm not stressed out about it at all. And even I think the first time we did something together, I felt more anxious when it wasn't working out.
Yeah.
And I just feel like this is what's happening right now.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can't fight the tide.
No, exactly.
No.
You can choose to freak out, or you can just breathe and be like, okay.
But what you were saying was so beautiful, and then all of a sudden you disappeared. So yeah.
Yeah, self-love.
Yeah.
That self-love stuff.
Why do you think, because this is something that comes up a lot, why do you think we as a culture, or people at large, when you say self-love, that people get triggered about that and think of that it means selfishness? Because we understand that actually it leads to more compassion for other people, but why do you think that's a trigger for people?
I think selfishness gets a bad rap. I mean, self-love is quintessential selfishness. It just happens to be a selfishness that is also the most generous expression of selfishness that you can have, because we know that when we are connecting to love of self, we naturally have more to give other people. When we're taking care of ourselves, we show up in a wholly different way. As the expression goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. And we know this, and we are conditioned in such a way to view self-care and self-love as this negative thing, like putting yourself before other people, how dare you, instead of really, and it's shifting because you're seeing a movement behind self-care and self-love, and more people who are understanding that to show up in their lives, they've got to take care of themselves differently. And that when they do, what they have to offer, not only themselves first and foremost, but the entire world, is something positive. It serves everything, but it has to start from within. And that's part of the creative process. It's very easy, I think, within the context of creativity, to look at what everyone else is doing and try to align your craft, whatever it is, writing or painting or music, with those things, instead of really centering yourself and checking in with yourself, like what is my truth? What is my expression? How does what is real for me infuse the art that I want to create in this world? And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be influenced. We're all influenced by everything. You know what I mean? Nothing is really original, but it means that whatever you bring to your creation is going to connect to a deeper sense of who you are, because you're actually taking the time to consider what is real for you within this story. And I think it's so important.
It's funny because that makes me think of how creativity really is the journey. I don't know about you, but like for example, I just was working on a song recently with Barry Goldstein, and we spent many, many hours on it. And I loved being in the song, but as soon as the song was done, I liked listening to it for about a day to kind of hear what we'd done, and then I was done. And now I can't feel what some of the people I played the song to feel, because it's no longer, and it reminds me of when I saw an interview with Kate Bush, she's a British singer-songwriter. She's a bit of a legend, right? Okay, you know her.
Yeah, oh,
She's
crazy about her.
Not
yeah.
as known in the US, but I saw an interview with her, and she basically said, yeah, I'm never really happy with anything I do. She said there's a certain level of satisfaction, otherwise I'd never release it. And I remember seeing that interview many years ago and both being surprised and enlightened, because it was like, yeah, I think we fall into the trap sometimes of fantasizing what the artist whose work we love is having as an experience. It's like, we'll probably love Bruce Springsteen more unreservedly than he will love himself or his work. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that Bruce isn't compelled to be in this creative journey of putting his work out. And I'm sure he probably, like many artists, as the years have gone on, has learned to be kinder to himself and his work, and have maybe a greater understanding of what his work represents in the world.
I think that's probably true for sure. And I also bet he's never totally happy with what he puts out, because I think that's the nature of creativity. And I think part of that process, for me at least, has been trying just to accept that. Like there are very few things. Like sometimes I write a sentence that I'm like, it's perfect, like 8 words, where I wouldn't change one word in this 8-word sentence, but like that's one sentence. You know what I mean? And part of releasing big love is part of releasing anything is knowing that, or feeling, or thinking actually, that you could always make it better. It could always be improved upon. You could always spend more time with it. And that's just part of the creative process. And so I think that what we can do with that, how we're best served in those moments, is how we're best served always, which is just to notice when our mind is thinking those thoughts without immersing ourselves in the drama of it. To kind of step behind and watch and think, that's just my mind doing the mind's insecure, crazy, fearful game. I don't have to play the lead actor in this story. It's okay. It's just what minds do. And I know because of who we are and how we work, that'll be an essential part of this workshop as well, is bringing people back to connection to the heart space, which is where truth lives, where real truth lives, where love lives, where the center of our creativity lives. Yes, our mind is imaginative and helps compel the creative process, but ultimately when we're really in the flow, when we're really creating from that place of flow with spirit, with God, with the trees, with life, however you view that, that's not a mental thing. That's coming from a much deeper place, a much more open, a much more expansive place. And that's a pretty cool place. And I can't pretend I'm always creating from that place at all, but the moments that I am, you feel it, and it's different.
But it's funny, you said a word in that to me is kind of like the holy grail of the creative process where your mind is concerned, which is the observer. So being
Yeah,
able to have an element of your own mind that's observing the craziness that's going on in it is the breakthrough. It's not that the self-doubt or the questioning thoughts have to go away, because they might never go away, but you can learn
yeah,
to have an adjudicator that sits in the middle and says, it's okay, you can walk away. And I think for me, that has been one of the pleasures of getting older and creating as much as I have over the years. Just, it's like that thing they say, the more hours you put in, the more you understand the nature of the beast. And I remember many years ago, so I've recorded these energy update videos for 7 years now, 7.5 years. And I remember about 4 years ago, my guides who I channel saying to me when I was kind of kicking myself about an energy update that I'd done, which was quite common back then. I'd be thinking, oh, I could have elaborated more on that. But the nature of an energy update is it's intuitive. So it's not like a scripted thing that I have pre-planned. And they just said, it doesn't really matter what you say. What's most important is the fact that you show up and show all the people that connect with you that you're down here on earth going through it too, and you're still alive. And I was like, it was like a light
absolutely.
bulb moment for me. And it really, it helped free me from some belief that I had to hit, that I was in any way the judge of what I was doing. Because I think now, I might still have those thoughts. I'll walk away from recording one and go, oh, I could have elaborated on that, but I never give it any time anymore. But go back many years and I would wrestle with it. And like you said, the drama, you learn through cultivation and through practice to not get involved in the drama when it comes to creativity.
Absolutely. And if you do get involved with the drama, like, that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like, even that we can accept, even that we can just notice. I love, there's a spiritual teacher named Muji, and he says, be like the screen, like a TV screen or a movie screen. He said, when there's a fire on the screen is not burning. When there's a waterfall on the screen is not wet. And I love that visual, because that's how we can approach our minds. When the mind is doing its crazy dance, when the mind is on fire, you are not burning unless you choose to immerse yourself in the center of the fire, which ultimately is a choice. And when you realize it's a choice, you realize also that there is a choice to extract yourself from that drama and to operate from a place of peace. And in this place of peace, what we're able to create tends to be, or can be, wholly different. Because that's not to say that people aren't creating really powerful things when they're like immersed in the insanity of their minds too. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Creativity comes from everywhere. So
Well, it's like, kind of the stage fright that you can get if you're someone who ever goes on stage or speaks or sings, or,
yeah,
that just because you're not feeling good right before you go out doesn't mean that it isn't going to be great. That's actually the anticipatory energy buildup. But also, it's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
one of the things you just said makes me think of painting. One of the best things I ever heard about painting was, if you're feeling really angry at your painting, paint angry for a while, and that was,
yeah,
it's like that's a great place to just kind of let your emotions and your feelings move through. And same, I guess, with writing. It's like if you're in a process workshop and you're journaling and you get really angry, write down those words and see what it is. So yeah, I like that.
yeah, yeah. I have to tell you, because I'm thinking about it when you mentioned the energy update. So I was just at the Art of Living Center, and some woman, there was this amazing sunset, and there were a lot of people on the deck outside the cafeteria looking at the sunset. And this woman looks at me, she says, and she says, "Hey, are you that guy who does energy things once a month?"
Oh, that's great. I hope you said
It was
yes. I
awesome.
hope you said yes and
No, I
gave her an
didn't.
energy
I said
update.
no. I said no, but I said he's
Oh,
a good friend.
that's funny. Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
really cute.
yeah.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was fun.
yeah,
It was sweet.
yeah.
What are you most looking forward to about our event in Asilomar?
Um, I get really, really turned on helping people put their work into the world. It's one of the things that has really risen to the forefront of my work in the last 3 years. So I love doing my energy work and the spiritual and self-growth work I do. I've done it for 15 years. and that's really important to me. But I also really love helping other people move into their idea, move past what it is they think's in the way of their idea, so that they can perform in the world, so that they can write their book or put their blog out or be bold enough to be on video. And I kind of like the two different sides of that. I really enjoy helping people see how to move past whatever's emotionally or psychologically in the way and how to understand it. But I also really enjoy brainstorming with them, helping them shape an idea. So I think that is the thing. I mean, apart from being there with you and the team that we've got coming, and the venue, and just having that time to kind of hold space together around creativity, for me, I can already feel that the people who come are going to go away empowered. I mean, that was, you and I spent quite a bit of time going, we know it's creativity, but what is it? But when we got creative empowerment as a title, we were like, yeah, that's absolutely what we're going to be building and bringing over the days. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, here. That sounds great. Me too. Yeah. All of that. Yeah. It's pretty beautiful. You're about to go into a gathering with a lot of people, and I'm just coming from one and feeling the high of what happens when people come together with their own intention, but rooted in a similar intention, and the magic that happens in those spaces. And I love it as much as I love anything in the world, connecting with other people in that space, and I can't wait. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
I can't see any questions. I don't know if
I'm having the same issue. I mean, what we could do, is I have a computer screen behind the phone here. So what I will do is I will open up the computer and we will have a look at Facebook. And we will see if we can see anything. So
cool.
If any of you are here with us, thanks for being here. We actually can't see anymore.
Yeah. I can see it says there are 120
okay,
people
and I can see lots of things happening. But let me just...
Yeah, that's all I see is the number. Yeah. Thank you all for hanging around through 5 attempts at this. Seriously.
Yeah. Patience is one of the things you need to be a creative. So I'm not surprised that all the creatives are joining us are patient with the technology. Okay, I see a bunch of comments happening here. So let me just scroll down and I'll be able to see. Are there any questions, guys? If there's anything you want to throw into the mix, the conversation, to ask, let's see. Okay, here we go. Brilliant. So Kristen says, here's my question. I don't feel creative at all. Ooh, that's a good one. So I'm not seeing all the comments here, but I'm getting quite a few coming up. So should we start with Kristen's, I'm not feeling creative at all?
Sure. Does that mean she is a creative who's having a creative block, or she's a person who doesn't believe that she has any creativity? I was feeling the latter first.
Yes.
That she doesn't feel like a creative person.
Yes. That would be my... So Scott, do you want to go first or shall I?
Sure. I mean, I would say, Kristen, you are a wildly creative being. We all are. That's inherent in each of us. If you were ever a child who played in any imaginative way, that creativity is still within you. And so the beautiful thing in understanding that is knowing that it is within you to connect with that creativity, and that there are clearly just some blocks to that connection. So if being creative is something that you want to do, if you're interested in exploring your creativity, one thing I would start with is where does your curiosity take you? Like when you imagine playing in the world of creativity, what things are you curious about? And so you may say, I don't have a musical bone in my body, but you're curious about the piano or you're curious about the guitar. I would encourage you to explore that curiosity, to follow the footsteps of wherever your curiosity leads creatively and see where it takes you. Because I think often we feel a pressure to be passionate about something, and not all of us are connected to a passion about something, but we're all curious about different things. And my curiosity has led me to so many different worlds, not all of which I stayed with, but many of which I played with at a time and then moved on from and played with something else. So that is, I guess the main things I would say to you would be play with your curiosity around creativity and see where it takes you. If creativity is something you want to explore inside of yourself, pray to it, write letters to it, invite it to participate in your life, but know without a shadow of a doubt that you are imbued with as much inherent creativity as any other person on the planet. That's just the way it is, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also to not get hung up on what your creativity needs to look like as an end result. Because I think,
Yeah.
we've got
Yes.
this really weird society that we've all been, especially those of us in Western culture, we're in this very weird paradigm where there are certain celebrated artists or creative endeavors, and then no one else is really encouraged to do that. Well, that's certainly how it feels to me. It feels like certainly the way that society was structured for us, we aren't invited as we go into adulthood by our societal structure to continue to be creative unless we happen to have a creative job, or if you end up being a parent, which is one of the biggest creative jobs out there, because you're constantly having to create and shape and mold and respond. So I would say to you to just try a few things, put on a song that you like and dance around your house privately for 5 minutes. Write a 10-line poem, and it can be awful. You're not trying to win a prize with this poem, but you are just going to write this poem. Because what I feel in your question is there's something there, there's some energy there, there's some emotion there. And if you just move into it, it will start to move and it will come alive in you. And that's where we tend to create from. It's quite normal as a creative to be scared of what you're going to create. In fact, I would say that's a really good sign. If you're nervous, intimidated, feel, even if you've done this for years, that's where the gold is, because there's going to be some energetic transformation for you. So that's what I would add to what Scott said. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Create, Kristen, create.
Yes. And we, as kids, we do that all the time. So I'm just pulling up this even my computer Facebook isn't playing. I'm definitely been played with over here. Hey, back off, you guys. We need to see the questions. So here we go. Let me see if I can only tend to see a few at the time. Oh, so Kristen said, so you can be creative, but it doesn't have to be good. Absolutely. Good is in the eye of the beholder, truly. I mean, think of the friend that you've got and you're like, oh my God, I love Bruce Springsteen. And they're like, oh, I hate his voice. I don't like his music. Doesn't mean his creativity isn't good. It just means there's something for everybody. Yeah.
I'm pulling up my computer too.
So I have one here from Stephanie. I go into creativity overload. I want to do it all. I get overwhelmed and don't know where to start. How do I get through that? Okay, so I have this thing that I believe about creativity, which is, and this is just my terms for it, but I believe that to be a good creative, you need to be able to be a visionary, an architect, and a builder. And normally we're good at one or two of those things, and there's a third one we need to develop. So the visionary part of us is the part of us that goes, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to write this book and it's going to be amazing. And then the builder would be the person who sits down and does the writing. And the architect would be the person who perhaps goes, okay, well, I'm going to plan and strategize this. I'm going to write for an hour every morning because my energy is best in the morning, and I'm going to see how much comes out, and maybe I'm going to structure some chapters. So we have the vision, which is the big idea. We have the part of us that's going to execute and build it, and we have the part of us that's kind of an overseer and a strategist. And I know for me, I was a very good visionary and a very good builder and a pretty weak architect for a long time. And not judging myself, I think that's quite normal. But what I learned to develop was strategy. So I would say for you, part of it, you know, as creatives, we can be a little ADHD because everything's exciting. And, you know, if you're a creative enthusiast, it can be like, I've got 12 ideas I want to do. But it's also really important to be able to see things through. So I would know when you're in a visionary mode, but I would also write notes for yourself about your projects from an architect standpoint, so that if one day you're not feeling very visionary, but you can do the nuts and bolts of it, you look at your list of how you're going to write that book and you're like, oh yeah, I did write down, try and write a chapter a week. Okay, well, I'll just sit down and try and write. So that's something I would throw into the mix.
I love that. Yeah, cool. I'm seeing questions now too.
Great.
Wait, I was.
I know, it's very funny, isn't it? Let's see.
Yeah,
I get like 4 at a
all
time.
stopping.
When I write songs,
Yeah, instead of
yeah,
showing.
I know. I just let it flow, and it feels as if I'm a channel sometimes. That's from Monica. Yeah, I definitely feel music and writing is channeling. Do you feel that, Scott? Like, because I think most creatives I know have a sense that something else is coming through.
Yeah, I mean, not all the time, but when I feel most, when I enjoy it the most, it's when I'm feeling that, when I'm getting out of my way. And for me, there are moments where it feels like spirit is flowing through you. You know, there's a flow, there's an openness, there's less ego involved. But I would say truly that most of my writing Wait, is this true? Yeah, most of my writing doesn't come from that totally open channel space. So when that when it does come, when that flow really does come, I'm super grateful, you know. And I feel like ultimately all we can do is set ourselves up to experience that by continuing to show up for our creativity. You know what I mean? And you will be touched by it. You will be in the flow, and you'll get, you know, some people call it the muse, whatever.
Yeah.
But the only way that you can be touched by it is if you're continuing to show up to create.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A really good question here from Christine. I have put my creativity on hold due to work, raising a child who is now an adult. I feel like I should start painting. How do I start? Should I do very small bursts of painting or devote an hour? Well, you know what I would say to this, Christine, is I would experiment. You know, maybe you will try 10 minutes of painting and see whether that satisfies you or gets the engine going, and maybe you'll realize I need an hour. I would trust your instinct around painting, and I would try doing it completely by yourself and just see what comes out of you. I would go on Facebook and find an artist who's doing live painting demos. I think it's really important to remember that it can be a process of exploration and learning. I think sometimes we can expect that, you know, we suddenly are hit by lightning and we become Michelangelo or something. And it, you know, actually it's quite a exploratory, down to earth process that I think we as creatives have to experiment with to see what's true for us. So yeah, I would say experiment, try things out.
100%. And I think that it's very easy to feel pressured by how other people go about their art. Like, I've listened to so many different writers who say every day they're showing up, even if they're not working on a specific book, like their butts in the chair every day between, you know, 9 a.m. to noon or whatever it is. And how I internalized that for many years was that I wasn't a real writer if I didn't have my butt in the chair every single day, the way all of these writers that I love show up. And the reality is that we're all different people and we all have different ways of being. So like Lee says, play, you know, play with different ways and honor what feels most true for you. You don't have to do anything any specific way. If it feels great for 10 minutes at a time or 10 minutes once a week, that's totally okay. There are no rules, you know, no rules at all. And also, Christine, I'd just like to say to you, I'm super excited for you that you're feeling energized and ready to dive back into painting on some level, because, you know, the thing I really feel in my heart that creativity is connected to love. There's a very similar vibration because they are both they're both inherent in who we are as human beings, and they're both things that tend to get crushed and buried by life and conditioning and bullshit and nonsense for a lifetime. And so I find that when I'm centered in my love, when I'm centered in honoring my creativity, I'm living a life that feels so much more aligned with truth and with who I am, and a life that feels so much more meaningful. And that's not to say in any way that our lives don't have meaning if creativity isn't a part of it. It's just that creativity will automatically and naturally enrich whatever other kind of life you're living right now. So kudos to you for diving back in.
Absolutely. And it's funny listening to what you just said, Scott, reminds me, I did private sessions for 14 years for people. And I remember in one session, I was channeling in the last part of the session for somebody, the Z's, and they said to this lady who was getting back into her creativity, they said the reason creativity is important is because it is you putting angelic and higher energies back into the world that you can then see. So for example, if you are painting something that is coming through a part of you that is tapping into a wider space, it doesn't mean, you're channeling guides necessarily. It's just you're opening up, you're bringing your higher self, your wider self, all of yourselves into the process. They said it's really healthy for us to see that back, to have it reflect to us in the world. They say it's essentially creating with light. And I remember that from years ago, and it made so much sense to me. And I think this goes back to, are we creating because we think we should be winning an award for what we've created? Or are we creating because the process of creating makes us feel good? That 30 minutes that we painted and played with color, we're not necessarily going to see that painting in a gallery, but we don't care because we saw red and pink moving, and you never know, you might die and it might be in a gallery and unbeknownst to you. But I think the point is it's the journey that we go on that you learn to really honor.
Yeah, I like that. Here's a good question from Tammy. It says, how do you hear what others think but don't let it stop you when they say something that doesn't resonate with you? I have stopped singing due to someone telling me in my past that I was off pitch, etc. I've stopped painting because someone said, well, why did you do it this way? You should really do it like this. I take others' criticism as not so constructive. And yes, I am currently in recovery from people pleasing.
Got it. That's a great question. Do you want to go first, Scott, or shall I?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd say a few things to this, Tammy. Some people will say, I don't care what other people think. I don't really believe that's the case for 99.9% of the people. The reality is we're human beings, we're sensitive souls, we are affected by the opinions of others. So it's entirely natural that you do care what people think. I care what people think. I would love to be someone who doesn't, but I care what everybody thinks about me. At the same time, I don't care enough anymore, most of the time, to stop from being who I am, to stop from saying what I feel called to say. And that's the difference, because when you start to understand that no matter what choices you make, Tammy, whether you're making choices from this like box of conditioning, trying to fit in and please everybody, or whether you're making choices from this expansive free place, people are going to judge you. People are going to criticize you. It's the nature of human beings. We are all judging one another. You will be judged. It is impossible to please everybody. And when you know that, when I really learned that, when I really understood that no matter what choices I make in my life, it will not please everybody and I will be judged for them, it allowed me to recognize that I would much rather make choices from the more expansive place. Because when you're making choices from freedom, what you're doing for yourself, how you're serving yourself is indescribable. And when you're making choices from this box of conditioning where you have to please everybody and you're so worried what people are going to think of you, you're imprisoning yourself, right? So to you, I would just say, you're going to be judged anyway. Create. You're going to be judged. I'm judged every day. Lee is judged every day. Every time we put something out on online, on social media, every time we speak, people are judging me right now for what I'm saying, thinking that what I'm saying isn't a really good enough answer. I should be, you know what I mean? That's part of being human. So the choice you have to make is, are you going to allow that to prevent you from realizing the indescribable gifts that come with honoring your truth and expressing your creativity however you feel called to create? And know that in doing so, you will absolutely connect with others. Not that it's about that, but that will naturally happen when you're honoring your truth. Because when we are operating from a place of truth, we cannot help but resonate with others who want to connect with people who are moving through this world in a more honest way. So I hope that's helpful. And whatever you have to add.
Hallelujah, baby. I love all of that. And yeah, I would add just one thing, which is there's some kind of wound in there from some of those figures in your life that have judged you. Because, for example, you could stand there and sing off pitch in my presence, and I'd actually just celebrate the fact that you were singing. Because if I need someone to sing in pitch, then I'll, find somebody who's sing. I think for me, there is something that happens to us when we've had a series of, I won't even say abusive relationships because that puts too much of a framework on it, but people who didn't really love, honor, see, or encourage us. And what can happen is we kind of gravitate to those people again. We re-enlist new friends who are a little bit judgmental. And I think just to add to, so there's something there to look at. There's an aspect of, okay, I need to heal some of this relationship I have to being afraid that I'm not good enough for other people because of how it makes me feel when they tell me that. And especially if you're a recovering people pleaser, that will be an aspect for you to look at separate from being a creative. But I would also just like to say everything Scott said was fantastic. And I think it goes both ways. Part of it is, I can say as a working creative, one of the things that has freed me by being in a job where I commit to showing up all the time is I learned to not only care a bit less about the judgment of others, but myself. Like, I don't have time to be a perfectionist when I'm committed to doing an energy update on a certain day. And that's not as comfortable as being able to comfortably sit at home in your room and think, I don't want to do it this month. So I think it goes both ways. I think there's, just like we're being judged by everyone else, for me, one of the biggest gifts I've experienced is I'm way less self-judgmental than I was, every year, I guess. But yeah, 20 years ago, my self-judgment was really high. So yeah.
I love that because that's what ultimately leads us to feel more comfortable expressing ourselves naturally, is when we're connecting to love of self. When we're and because in not being as judgmental, for me that equals being more loving. Like those two things go hand in hand. And yeah, I don't know. I always circle back to self-love.
Yeah.
It's such a starting point for everything,
But it's funny you said this, because one of the things for me with, I think online criticism is like a big thing for us to learn from, all of us. It's kind of new still, those of us that are older, if you're not in your teens or your early 20s, you haven't grown up with the online world. We're still getting used to it. And I've had many people say, oh my God, how do you handle awful criticism? And I'm like, well, a lot better now than I did at the beginning. Yeah. But at the beginning, what I started to learn was to pay attention to the sentences that really wounded me. Like, I was like, wow, that person just said that. And it was the ones that went into my heart and my body. The question would always be for me, is that historic for me? Have other people leveled that criticism at me and it hurt? Or is it something I also believe about myself or criticize about myself? Yeah. So, I'm an advocate of online criticism can be really useful and really helpful to your personal process. Sometimes someone criticizes something and you go, you're right, I did waffle on a bit in that video. I'll make a note of that. Next time I'll try and make it more concise. But sometimes people are just putting the knife in. And that's when it's really important to go, I feel for that person because they're trying to wound. but I've got to a point with this where I no longer need to play with their knife. I see that they're holding a knife, and I don't really know people like that in my life. So they happen to be in the online world. Okay, that's part of the course.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? Let's see. Yeah, I'm only seeing, are you still only seeing 4 comments at a
That's
time?
all we are allowed to see, Scott. The Facebook
We're
wants
only allowed
Facebook's
to
like
see.
we get four at a time until we behave.
Yeah.
Um, Marianne says thank you for this. Oh, thank you, Marianne. Um,
Thanks for being here.
yeah, Tammy. Um, Here we go. Someone here, Tam said, thank you, Lee. I sing, but am definitely not in tune. It is so fun and freeing. You know, this is the tricky thing because if we were tribal, which many people in the world still are, they live in much more tribal communities, we would sing, we would dance, we would, we would do all of these things as an expression, not to have a CD or win a singing
Yeah.
contest on television. So I think it's just part of that judgment that exists in our culture that I do think is changing. And I think it's moving. And for many of us, it's not a paradigm that we land in at least all the time, but it's definitely there. It definitely permeates. So yeah, I think creativity is therapeutic and is really necessary for yourself, let alone what you're putting out into the world.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Hey, Maria Palazzo. I know Maria through an art retreat event called Art Is You,
Oh,
which is
nice.
this wonderful gathering of mixed media artists that happens usually once or twice a year. Yeah. Hi.
Beautiful. And
Hi,
were
Donna.
you doing art there, Scott, or were you speaking or?
No, I was speaking. Yeah, I was
Nice.
the organizer called me the morning motivator. So I
Oh,
would speak in the mornings and just get the vibe
that's
rolling.
great.
But I would jump into like I would peek it in classes and maybe play a little, but mostly I was just there to speak.
That's nice.
Sally says, "Big fan, Lee. I think you are amazing, and I look forward to your updates every month. You
Thank
have
you.
taught me a lot."
Oh, thank you.
Aw, Sally, I'm a big fan of his too.
I'm a big fan of yours,
I,
and thank you all of you for being here. Um,
yeah, truly.
and it's interesting, Farron, you're writing something really lovely here that kind of you're saying you both are such beautiful incarnations of the divine masculine. So reassuring just to witness that in our world right now, in addition to the amazing quality of your specific messages. Thank you so much. Well, firstly, that's a
Thank you
lovely
very
thing to
much.
say, but I'll speak for myself, Scott. I think I might be speaking for you too, but you can tell me. I don't think either of Scott or I have that intention, and I'm sure there are places I can tell you about where I think, oh, I can improve there, and I can learn to be more divine masculine in this area. But I think why I'm bringing your comment up is, isn't that an interesting byproduct of this conversation that we chose to have with a focus? There's been a positive effect for you because we showed up to do something that we felt compelled to do, but we could never have known that was what you were going to get from it or how you were going to use it. So it kind of goes back to that thing of be compelled to create and be compelled to show up, but we never really know what we're doing for someone else. But that's why I think it's really important to have some kind of letting go of your art or your creativity. You never really know what it's going to do for someone
Mhm.
else, but if you feel compelled to show up and you get to connect with people, for me, that's the gold of the whole thing.
I love that. It's totally out of our hands. That all of us, not just my hands and Lee's hands. It's like ultimately in creation, I think if you can have faith when you feel called to create something and you show up to do it, you're doing your job. Beyond that, how it's received by other people, it's 100% out of your hands. You know, Lee has written several books. I've written a couple. You put them out there into the world. You don't know how they're going to be received. You hope for the best. You hope it resonates with people. But those things are completely beyond your control, which comes back to Lee speaking in the very beginning about how much of this is about the journey. And I think that's a lot of, at least in part, what we'll focus on as well in the workshop is just the journey of creating and what that can bring. How joyful, infuriating, impassioned, frustrating, all of those things that come with the creative process. But how rich and meaningful that the journey alone is. And then knowing that if you choose to release your creativity to the world, it's like it will land where it's meant to land. And the beautiful thing is it's going to land in places you could never have dreamed of. You know, you will touch people's hearts that you'll never even know about. Some you may know about, but many people you won't even know. And yet your willingness to show up and have the courage to share your heart and your art with the world, you know, creates magic in one way or another.
Yeah. And it just kind of goes back to that belief that I think we all can have, which is you've got to be perfect, you've got to be ready. You know, and I don't really know if anyone ever feels that. Yeah, and I'll give you one other quick example that comes to mind. So my husband, Stephen, who is wonderful, came with me to his first Tori Amos concert about a year ago. And I have been to about 10 Tori Amos concerts since 2001. I see like most
She's
of her
amazing
tours. Yeah,
live.
oh my God. She talk about someone plugged into source.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious because Tori Amos concerts, any of you who know, they're notoriously long. Like she'll go for about 2.5 hours. And on the way home, I offered to put her album on and he went, no, thank you, that's fine. And I realized, even though he admired her, and at our house, he goes, oh, is that the singing pixie again? He hears her and has a relationship with her that's completely different to the one I have. For me, she's one of my big musical heroes, and especially in my kind of 20 to 30, 35 age bracket, she was crucial. So she still is always going to be a part of my musical life and love. But for him, he hears it differently. She's not necessarily his medicine. He can appreciate her. And I think it's really valid and important to kind of just remember that. And I always advise people who are scared of public judgment, go to Amazon and find your favorite author, your favorite singer-songwriter, go to the reviews, hit the 1-star reviews, and read what people are saying in the negative about the people that you love. And when you get over the shock, oh, I can't believe they said that Eckhart Tolle is the devil, because he is the friendliest, most peaceful man I've ever seen. You start to realize it's not personal. It's just the public forum. And again, there are some people who want to put the knife in and they don't like someone being successful or approved by others. And then sometimes there is legitimate criticism where they go, oh, this isn't scientific enough for me, or which is fair enough. But it just goes to show that no one is going to like everything. It just isn't possible. And if you're trying to protect yourself from anybody who won't like you, you're actually going to have trouble in life, not just as a creative, but that's going to limit the way you live as a human being. And I'm not saying that's easy to overcome. I think the first step is noticing it and, you know, noticing our triggers and our wounds as they come up, because they do, but being loving and curious about them and seeing how we can move them somewhat or open them or gently just step forward a little bit more each time, because there's a lot of energy that we don't always invite ourselves into.
Yeah. And understanding that even praise, it's all ego. Like if we're not going to attach ourselves to the criticism, why would we attach ourselves to the praise? Like, I'm grateful always if somebody reaches out to me and tells me that my work has touched them in some way. But what that does for our ego can be as insidious as what the criticism does for our ego, because we're being lifted by people approving of us, or we're being torn down by people rejecting us. And when we're operating from an energy, and it's all mental, right? When you're operating from an energy of love, when you're operating from the heart, love just loves. Love just loves, no matter what's going on. Love is unfazed. That energy is peaceful within the context of approval or dismissal or whatever else is happening outside of us. It is within our power to center ourselves in an energy that is unfazed, undeterred, unimpacted by anything happening out there. And it just so happens that it's not easy to do. I mean, if I get that a minute a week, I'm thrilled. You know what I mean? Where I feel that centered. But the reality is it's within us at all times. And so I try also not to get, even though I try not to get too hopped up on any accolades people are pouring on me, because I recognize it's coming from the same place when I get despondent over criticism from people. And there's a way we can be peaceful within it all and trusting within it all, that if we're operating from this space of truth and sharing ourselves, our love, our voice, our creativity from that place, then we're okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think so much of what you said there kind of makes me realize that one of the biggest questions I get asked, or one of the biggest fears I see in creatives who want to step out into the world, I think it's that fear of losing the introvert. Like somebody once said to me, "Oh, I'm not an extrovert like you, or as brave, or no, as fearless as you are." And I said, "Oh, I'm not an extrovert all the time. I can't be." I said, "And I'm not fearless either." I said, "It's just that I've learned to understand that you put work out into the world, and it's kind of nothing to do with you anymore." But like you said, Scott, like I really love getting to connect with people through the work, but it's kind of, I can't fully understand what it's doing for someone else. And it's kind of none of my business, because you're putting something out into the world that then someone else is experiencing through their filter, and you couldn't possibly even comprehend it, even if you want to try. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's a delicate balance, really. And I think sometimes we have this illusion, this idea, I certainly had it with Tori Amos in my early 20s when I wanted her career, or thought I wanted her career. I basically told myself she was like the happiest person in the world, and what heaven for her that she's on stage playing. And now, because I understand, you know, at the time that was like, oh, I totally glorified that career. You know, and then you read her book and it's like she's having awful stuff with the record company right before she walks on stage. And that moment when she connects with the audience is her high point of the day. But she's going through all the human stuff. So I think we can also sometimes misperceive that if people praise us, or if people praise what we have done, it's going to fill in all our childhood wounds to need to be seen, need to be loved. And it doesn't. And I think that's why it can F a lot of people up, because they suddenly get very successful. They thought they would be very happy and fulfilled, and they're not. And sometimes the personal issues amplify because of the stress of lots of people coming at them and it not being the life they thought it was going to be. So it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, peace does not live outside of us. It can't. It lives within us, you know, and so for me, beyond anything, I will bring this to the workshop because I feel it's so important. Beyond anything, like, how can we continuously connect to the ocean of love that lives within us and allow that energy, the energy of love, to be the guiding force in all that we do in our lives? Because when we are coming from that place in all that we do, and certainly with our creativity, that's when you get in the flow. That's when you feel like you're being supported by spirit. And that's when everything is energy. So it makes intuitive sense that when you're operating from the energy of love and you're generating that energy, that's the energy that you'll magnetize. Those are the connections that you'll establish more often in your life. Those are the possibilities that you'll create more often. Because that's the essence, right, of the law of attraction, is energy attracts like energy. So it makes sense that to operate from a place of love, what that's going to invite and create in your life is going to be more beautiful and more profound than anything else could be. You know, I'm a big fan of love.
What's your book called, Scott?
Big Love.
Big Love, baby. It's fabulous. If you haven't read it, it's amazing. Big Love, Scott Stabile, on Amazon.
Should we wind down, or I mean,
no, we probably should, I guess.
Yeah,
we probably should.
Well, what else do you have coming up in your life that you want to tell people about? You've got a bunch of events, don't you?
I just want to say quickly, because Wendy has put this question very out of my comfort zone. You're about to officiate the wedding of your niece, and then the question disappeared, and you're feeling out of your comfort zone. I've officiated 3 weddings or 4, and you're always out your comfort zone. Try and remember it's because everyone else is stressed as hell, and everyone else is like freaking because it's a wedding, and everyone's like losing their mind. So part of it isn't you, part of it's just the group energy. And just hold a grounding and a presence for love. You're really going to be there to anchor everybody in, because in a ceremony, everybody anchors in. And all this, have I got my outfit right? You know, this craziness that can happen at weddings, and everybody's uncomfortable because they don't know everybody and they feel a little bit. So you're the person that everyone's going to focus on and is going to ground love. So it doesn't matter what you say, just hold that intention. It doesn't really matter what you say, just be in your heart about that couple and recognize that you are speaking words for the whole congregation. It's not really about you. It's just about you being a channel for guiding them into that ceremony. So you'll be fabulous.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. So Scott, you were asking me, what have I got coming up? Well, I have a retreat called Creative Empowerment with Scott Stabile. And do you remember the date, Scott? I meant to pull this up on the website.
I think it's the 20th to the 23rd of February.
Well, let's hope you're right. Well, listen, why don't we just go there then? And if we get the dates wrong, we get the dates wrong. I mean, I'm sure no one will mind. Let's see.
Or when we hang up, Lee, you can maybe put a link at the top of the video.
I have it.
Yeah.
But it's February 20th to the 23rd, 2020. And it's at Asilomar Retreat Center, and it's called Creative Empowerment, and it is the art of expressing, valuing, and sharing your creativity. So we're going to look at everything from bringing creativity through, learning how to value your creativity and what the value of your creativity is, but also sharing it with the outside world. So if you're somebody who's wanting to take the next step into sharing your work, we'll have sessions all about the nuts and bolts of that in the outside world, but also the internal journey that we go through. And if you're somebody who isn't necessarily looking to do that, but you want to just open up your own creative expression, we're going to do all kinds of things around that. So, yeah.
And we're going to laugh a lot.
We're going to laugh. I think at least
we laugh a lot.
At least
3 times.
At least 3 times that week.
No, we promise.
Yeah, we promise.
We are committed to laughing 3 times.
Yeah, we're a bit naughty actually. You know, it's funny. We did this podcast interview, and it was just the most rambunctious podcast interview I'd done so far. That's the nature of us two. So yeah, we're not as serious as our bald heads make us look. We promise.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna laugh a lot, and we're gonna have a good time. So yeah, if you feel to be there, check it out. So if you can go to leeharrisenergy.com or scottstabile.com. It's there at your website too, right, Scott?
It will be tonight.
It will be now.
It should be.
You know what? We also have a special link, and it's leeandscott.eventbrite.com. But we'll put the links underneath this video.
Thank you all, everyone who stuck with us through this whole thing, and for
the first 4 failed attempts. Yeah, thank you, Ziz, or whoever it was that finally gave us permission, and to be here.
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah.
And sorry about the questions we didn't see or get to.
Yeah, but thank you for the ones that we did get to talk about, and thank you for being here, having this conversation. And whether we're seeing you or not in February or on a future live that we do, try something out that's creative and that's different, not because what you create has to be good, but because the very act of just creating something, whether we dance around our house, whether we cook something intuitively, whether we go into the garden and move some things around, it moves energy. So it's really therapeutic. And especially in times like these, when so many of us are learning to balance our energy and galvanize our energy as things get a little more crazy out there, the highs and the lows are bigger. Creativity is a really good anchoring act.
Hallelujah, brother.
Yeah. Okay. Big love, everybody.
All right.
Big love,
Big love, everyone.